Mm-hmm. Well, what it does is it potentially may level the playing field for the Democratic Party a little bit, at least on the issue of turnout, right? All of the enthusiasm, all of the turnout advantages were with the Republicans. The wind was blowing in their direction. You know, we're at a point in our politics that it takes negative news to fire up a political party. You know, you run it. Fear is a better motivator than hope these days, and the Democrats now have a fear issue, the fear of losing abortion rights, and that can be a turnout motivator. And I think that you know when you level that playing field a little bit, it can change the dynamics of what each campaign will look like. Hmm. Well, I think what's fascinating about that is the fact that it isn't close, and the fact that just 4 years ago, Connor Lamb having all this establishment support, essentially the tacit support of the president, the machine folks in Philadelphia, and the fact that that is meaningless. I think number one, it shows you the strength of John Fetterman's brand inside the Democratic Party. Number one, but I also think it shows you the weakening of the sort of the old, the old party bosses that used to make Pennsylvania politics run, both in the Democratic side and the Republican side. Doesn't work that way anymore. You got it. All right. Got it. My God. Yes. I sure can. I'm okay. Excellent. Ready to roll? Happy to do it. Well, I think we learned in a crowded primary the endorsement matters, and that is the caveat I would use: crowded primary. You can look at it with one eye and say, boy, look. J.D. Vance does not win this primary without Donald Trump's endorsement. Hard stop. You look at it through another lens, and you sit there and say, wow, 68% of the Republican electorate voted for somebody that wasn't endorsed by Trump. But a lot of the candidates were running as Trump candidates. So you can't say that Trumpism isn't the dominating force inside the Republican Party. And I do think when you look at all those candidates, J.D. Vance was the most authentic Trump surrogate of that group. I think Mandel got exposed as somebody who was sort of a faux Trump person. I think Jane Timken had a hard time coming across as genuine to Trump voters. And I think Gibbons the same thing. And so of that group, I think that Vance was able to do that. I think the question now is whether the Trump brand, while it is very helpful in a primary, it isn't as beneficial in a general. The question is Ohio Republican enough where that won't matter? Mm-hmm. Well, if you're Tim Ryan, I think that's exactly where you start. When you actually look at where Dolan did best, he did best in those suburban, larger population centers in Ohio. Well, those are voters that I think are most likely to perhaps be persuadable for Ryan. Look, this whole thing is going to be about whether he is able to paint J.D. Vance as too far out of the mainstream. Sherrod Brown successfully was able to do that in 2018 to his Republican opponent and was able to sort of tie him to Trump and tie him as too far out there. Now, there's a fine line that I think Ryan's got to walk. Trump's pretty popular in certain parts of the state. It is obviously a state that Trump carries. So bashing Trumpism isn't something you do. The question is, can you separate Trumpism from Trump? Can Ryan make himself the more authentic economic populist over Vance? Can he paint Vance as a San Francisco venture capitalist? I think it's a hard sell he's got to do there. But if he does it, then yes, those Dolan voters could become swing voters. I'm not saying they are there yet, but that's certainly the first place Tim Ryan's going to look. Mm-hmm. Well, Vance, it's simply, consolidating the Republican support. I think there's a reason why J.D. Vance was so conciliatory last night, even to Mr. Dolan, right? He can't afford to have any fracturing of the Republican coalition. Look, he is about as far away from Rob Portman as you can get as a Republican, right? Particularly on foreign policy issues and on trade issues. Rob Portman and J.D. Vance, they couldn't be further apart. In many ways, Portman and Dolan were, I think, much more ideological soulmates than Vance and Portman. So that's it. In some ways, that's the easy thing for Vance. Don't get in don't get too far out of the mainstream. What Ryan's got to do, I think he's got to hope for a couple of things. Number one, I think he's got to hope the abortion issue becomes more front and center. Because if it does, it fires up Democratic voters. It'll probably mean more money for Ryan to run in that race. So that's number one. But the second thing is he's got to lay claim to the economic populist message. He's got to make Vance look, hey, he's a venture capitalist. He needs to make that a negative. Hey, those venture capitalists, they're the ones that take the jobs away. If he can successfully do that, then there's a path for Ryan. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I was intrigued that in her victory speech last night, she was trying to make common cause with those that voted against Mike DeWine. But as you point out, I don't know if they see eye to eye. I think they both have issues with Mike DeWine, but I think they're very different issues, if you will. But and I'll put it this way. If Mike DeWine were running without J.D. Vance on the top of the ticket, sharing the top of the ticket, I think DeWine would be in some big trouble. Because I would say, boy, I don't know if the base is going to turn out for Mike DeWine. But the base may turn out for J.D. Vance and then hold their nose and vote for Mike DeWine anyway. So I don't know if she can pull that off, she's going to be governor. If she's able to somehow peel away, if they're J.D. Vance, Nan Whaley voters, I just don't know if they do exist. I do believe, though, look, with the governor, with the governor's race, I think all governor's races in general are going to see the abortion issue become among the most dominant topics because it is the governors now. It is the state legislatures and the governors that suddenly are going to be making abortion policy. I think that's a potential opening for her if she can somehow paint DeWine as being for having no access at all, and she is able to be the candidate that wants to have some access. It all depends on what the debate is, but if the debate is about access to no access, that is a place where Whaley perhaps could find an advantage. You got it. Thank you. Great.